Why is EDH, or Commander as it's better known, popular? Probably for the same reason I like open-ended questions. They're fun. But to really understand why Elder Dragon Highlander took Storm as a Magic format, we need to have a quick TLDR brief history on the Commander format, as I suspect it will provide us some necessary information as to why it, out of all 42 formats, you couldn't have just had your cake. Let's start with the basics, and let's start with a golden rule. Commander has come under several names, starting with Elder Dragon Legend Wars and Elder Dragon Highlander. For the purposes of minimal confusion, and because I said so, I'm going to be calling it Commander. So, EDH, shit. Commander was originally created because Adam Stanley, a creator of the original concept of Commander, wanted something new for the repetitive format. The idea was that you would see different cards that people weren't using anymore because they didn't have a choice. They had a 100-card deck and every single card had to be different. It was obvious games in Magic were limited to the same decks over and over again, but outside of that, nothing to really back our question. But is this concept the same reason the format grew? One of the most potent hooks of EDH was nostalgia. Even today, perhaps especially today, Magic cards fall in and out of favour as new sets are released and the competitive landscape changes. The EDH format allows players from any era of Magic to pick up where they left off, using old tricks against new cards. Now, nostalgia, you say? Hey, that reminds me of a piece of text I immediately researched, specifically for this video from BigBear. Without wishing to shade into pretension, a philosophical position exists arguing that only a fraction of your identity exists at each moment of your existence. Your complete identity is found only in the entire span of life. I'm not sure how compelling this position is, I certainly find it at least romantically attractive. Regardless, it provides an interesting perspective on the reason for nostalgia. We wish to reach back, not to relive a moment, but to broaden our very identity, to gain a more holistic sense of self. Having a true knowledge of oneself requires a kind of timeless position, embracing all moments of life simultaneously. How can one truly express to another their identity in mere moments? How does one share that entire story? I can't imagine that being the objective when pulling out a Eurocode deck with a smug smile and a little bit of drool, but to some extent, maybe a small extent, that's exactly what we're trying to do. Humans learn a lot from the shoes we see each other wearing to the firmness of a handshake, even where our eyes are mid-conversation. So who's to say the deck we pick up, the coloured boarded we pick, and the commander we roll with isn't just an attempt to communicate with each other? I'll be the first to admit, my Arcades the Strategist deck was built on the precipice of being the underdog. Walls do nothing at first glance, then boom, huge value when matched with the right commander, and now swinging in for lethal. Hey, don't judge a book by its cover, kid. Also, please, just let him resolve. My deck is literally useless without him. All this talk about identity of the individual took me back to chapter 1 of George Simmel's work, The Metropolis and Mental Life. Specifically when he says, first of all, there is the difficulty of giving one's own personality a certain status within the framework of metropolitan life, where quantitative increase of value and energy has reached its limits. One seizes on quantitative distinction so that through taking advantage of existing sensitivity to differences, the attention of the social world can in some way be won for oneself. This leads ultimately to the strangest eccentrics, to specifically metropolitan extravagances of self
distanciation,
caprice,
fastidious,
the meaning of which is no longer to be found in the content of such activity itself, but rather in its being a form of being different, of making oneself noticeable. What I take away from reading the whole chapter, must mind you if that quote didn't really even do justice to what I'm trying to get at. My takeaway is that our human struggle for freedom of individualism has led us to seek greater reinforcement towards individualism, consequential to our combined agreed sense of value being accomplished by many, therefore ununique in its nature when identifying ourselves to others. Therefore, we seek behaviours or strategies that are ever-growing and overcompensating for individuality and freedom where possible, using these markers as new targets for our self-value, value of others, and are religiously upheld for self-preservation. Dude, that is a lot of words, so let me preach it so that even I understand what I'm trying to say. I wonder if we live in a world where playing the same cards every game is not enough. We have an inbuilt function to be different, to express one's own values, such as brewing new decks, creating new concepts, working against the meta, finding new resources in a commander, a Magic the Gathering format with plenty of cards. You now have a format that specifically targets the individual. Well, how? Multiplicity with general equal value. I mean that your Atraxa Praetor's voice may go against a Metatron Tyrant and still hold up to the foundations of equal play. The difference being both players expressing differently and still in the same design of self and the choice of their identity. I want to use Megatron as a segue for this topic. That's an odd sentence. Do you think Magic the Gathering has so many new sets coming out because it offers more variety of identity for players both already invested and potential investors? If we sit away from the very easy, finger-wagging, big corporation want more money stereotype, I start to wonder why Wizards would be creating such diverse playstyles, mechanics, art designs, and countless other factors more and more. They could be improving a game, like how a video game designer fixes bugs, but instead they opt for variety. But does that make this move correct? According to general conversation, people are pretty split about Magic's future and collaboration, but for me, I'd have to agree with Arrowhead Studios. A game for everyone is a game for no one. Does this rule apply to Magic the Gathering when we're talking about Commander? For Magic the Gathering, yes, but for Commander, no. Bring back the meme. Here's what I mean. I think this rule applies when we are seeing the downfall of it in some formats like Standard, whereas Commander is immune to the rule. Standard has players playing with specific cards and specific sets. There isn't much wiggle room. So if the cards they are given are cards that make them feel like this game is for everyone, forgetting them, the core audience, they might throw in the towel. So why does Commander refuse to bow down to this rule? Well, I start to wonder if it's because Commander balances a few variables quite delicately. One, for instance, is its card pool. This pool is big. Lots of fish to swim in there. And two, unlike formats with larger pools of cards, this one allows for a variety and budget whilst not sacrificing playability with friends or strangers. I'm not saying every deck you build or see built will match up to each other evenly. I just think, and maybe naively, that most times in a pot of 4, you'll be alright to play that bracket 2 Mabel Heir of Cragflame deck because you think mice are cute, and god damn it, you would be right. Charlie Hall in 2020 wrote an article summing up key points regarding Commander's popularity. Commander has become the kind of de facto casual, social format, and it's made it really easy. Now, no matter who you are, if I ask you to play a game of Magic, I have a Commander deck and it plays the same rules as yours, and we're ready to go. To me, that's really powerful, and why it's become, arguably, the largest format in Magic. I both agree and disagree with this statement. Yes, I think a huge drive to Commander as a format is perpetuated by the common understanding that most everyone is going to have a Commander deck on hand. I've seen this firsthand in my occupation where new players to the Magic scene draw themselves instantly to pre-constructed decks in Commander because they know the player base is rich, full of people. Why I disagree with the statement though is because it feels like it's essentially saying lots of people play this format, which is why more players play. Which doesn't answer for me why it became popular in the first place, though I can understand, as I mentioned before, why it contributed to its growth. Then again, if I look back at my question, why is EDH popular? I have to realize the past and present tense of Commander should all in one be taken into consideration when identifying all factors to this format's uprise. Does identity play a big role in why Commander has seen so much growth, or other rules, gameplay, and player base just so good? Hell, maybe both. Do I really want to know if my Commander choices is linked to my personality, given that I want to build an Dragon deck? Probably not. But has social culture shown in some way we're connected to our cards? Yeah, I think so.